There we go. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster. I was seeing if you were going to slip into old habits.
And I'm your co-host, AR.
Yeah, guys, AR is back after not like unofficially, but like you'll always be my co-host in spirit, AR. Just yeah, I think we talked about it, and you're eager to come on for a number of things, but I'm resisting the urge to be like, come on for everything. But no, I'm very happy to get you whenever you're able. Anyway, so yeah, AR's back, and we've got some wonderful guests this week joining them. We have Jared and Blue Lemons. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Hey.
I'm so excited to be back doing this, and did like a little sneak preview before Ice and Fire Con, and then it took that week off, and now we're back, and we're going to be talking the Batman. Not quite the right bat signal, but but I think I got the spirit right. So first of all, just how you guys been doing? I didn't get to see any of you at Ice and Fire Con, but it's just great to have you on the channel, and just great to be talking to you.
No, but you and Steven and everyone there recorded me a very lovely birthday wish video, which would truly meant a lot to me. So I was jealous to be missing out with you guys, but I was very happy that you were all together.
Yeah, the joke I made on the video was I wondered if anybody thought I was actually sending that to somebody, or if it's just another part of the ruse. But then Steven was like, no, you're sending it to a paid actor. So how you been, Trish?
Really good. Just incredibly busy with real life stuff and developing my business, which is going very well, and I'm happy about that, but it's taken me a little bit away from things, and I'm so thrilled to be back as a guest, because it's always a wild ride when we talk about movies. So
yeah, and how are you doing, AR? Wait, somebody's got a scratchy
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mic.
I'm gonna mute and see if it's me.
Okay. I don't think it's you. Let me we'll just go through.
We're gonna plug on through. The show must go on.
Yeah, so I think it's you, Blue.
did it go away, or is it?
I don't know.
Is it still there?
We'll see
how it goes. It wouldn't be one of my streams without some technical hiccups.
Yes. Yeah, it's been 2 years since your lovely viewers since I've graced my presence on this channel. Yeah, it's been kind of, well, it's actually been, oh man, it's been crazy literally for me, because I was hospitalized and diagnosed bipolar. So it's been 2 years of focusing on my mental health, and I'm really excited to be back on YouTube talking with my friends.
That's weird. I don't think it's Blue, because it's still going. Jared, can you mute your mic for a second? Oh yeah, I can't hear you at all. So so
all right, there we go.
Well, this is off to a great start.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Hey, process of elimination. We got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but anyway, AR, it's just such a pleasure to have you back. Like I said, Jenna's laying
Jenna.
Blame at your feet.
Oh, it's these Apple headphones. They're evil.
So anyway, we're talking the Batman. I have to say, like, I am not going to spend any time, except for apparently right now, going on about, like what my preferred, types of comic book films are. But like, this is just right up my alley. And not because, you could point out its sort of dark and gritty nature, that, that's definitely part of it, but it's just, this is tackling really heavy issues, and giving us a sense of, I hate to use the dreaded realism word, but it just feels so relevant to things in society, and the emotional pathos is just so, gripping, and yeah, like, and I just finished watching the movie a little bit ago, and there's some stuff at the end. There's one particular moment at the end, which is a line of dialogue that's delivered that hits you like a ton of bricks, and so yeah, this is, I think this type of movie is where I live right now with these kinds of movies. But I know this was a favorite this past year for a number of people on this stream. So we'll just go around. AR, you've been gone the longest, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick on you first. What was your reaction to this film, and what do you like or not like, generally about it?
Yeah, since it's your channel, I won't spend too much time on the dislikes, John. I know you like to keep it positive. I saw this in theaters, so that was really nice. It was nice to have that theater experience. And I remember that I really liked it, and I went with two people, and one person was meh about it, and the other person hated it. And I was like, well, I liked it. So when you said you were going to talk about it, I was like, well, I want to come on then. So I liked, I think it's the aesthetic that really caught me. And also I was in Chicago when they were filming, so I have like a little bit of like nostalgia for it. But I think the gritty feeling of Gotham, and of like this nihilism, and like kind of the this idea that it's a dying city, I found that really compelling.
Yeah, I noticed on this viewing, like, how many times the camera will linger on the city, as like, you've got characters in the scene, but then maybe the camera holds back, as those characters walk off screen, and you get to see like the dire straits of not just how bad the city looks, but it's how the people are suffering in it. So yeah, I just thought all that was great.
If I could do like a little dislike, just a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of people complained about the length of the movie. I personally watch Bollywood movies, so I was like prepared, because I watch 4-hour long movies. So I really didn't find that big of a deal. But that seemed to be like the internet's mantra for weeks, was that it was too long. And I was like, just because you say it's too long doesn't make it so. Like, too long is objective or subjective. Which one is it?
Subjective. Yeah.
Subjective. It's subjective. Yes, it's subjective. Because what you're willing to, how long you're personally willing to sit for a movie. Like, my dad will sit 30 minutes and then he has to stand up. So some people can't even do a whole, a 1 hour and 15 like Disney movie, And so I think I have like a higher tolerance for long form storytelling. And that's why I enjoy novels more than like short stories or poetry. So I really liked that we got so much time with the characters. And so I liked that it was long.
Yeah, I stayed awake through the whole movie, and that's a big deal for me.
I can say from personal experience, this is true.
Yes.
Like, God love you, Trish, and I am going to pick on you a little bit right now, but and granted, everybody was giving themselves ample fuel for falling asleep, shall we say, at HereBeCon, but she fell asleep while we were watching Aliens.
I can't help it. I can't help it. It's dark. I got a blanket. It's comfortable.
But at least you weren't Nessie, who fell asleep about 5 minutes into Dune. Which she's since seen the whole thing and she loves it. But like I said, there were other forces at work causing sleepiness. But no, about the length of the movie, I mean, I've like, oh God, it just started raining outside and all I heard was like some noise. And for those who don't know, my dad is out of town. So the house is, is empty. So it's like, oh God, who's in the house? Okay. Anyway, getting over that, I've been fighting the length battle for years. I mean, defender, from day one of the Return of the King, when people were complaining about the length of that movie and the claims of multiple endings. So yeah, I've long since been more than happy to sit there, as long as it's engaging. And what I like about this is I do see where it comes from, because because you do reach a point in this movie where you don't quite know exactly where it's going, but things ramp up, and then it's like there's a new act that it's like, oh, this is what the Riddler has planned. And so I do kind of see where that conversation comes in, but I don't agree with it. I think this movie is wonderful at its length, and I don't mind 3-hour movies. So Jared, I think I heard you guys talking about this when I came backstage earlier. I think this was your favorite movie of the year. Am I right?
It was. It was my favorite movie of 2022. In a kind of a tier of movies that I really, really loved, this ultimately, I think, emerged at the top, partly because of the sheer level of affection. Questionable. I have for the Batman character and the Batman mythos, and I think part of the reason I ended up adoring this movie so much is this movie was a unique hybrid of all the elements I truly love about the Batman character, and ultimately the message of why that character is so important. My kind of Batman influences are kind of a unique hybrid between growing up with watching the Batman animated series, which is kind of celebrates the character and all his pulpy comic book glory, and the Batman movies that were airing around the time that I was really starting to get into movies, which was Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy, which is really the kind of gritty, grounded, realized take on Batman that people have been crying out for. And this movie not only brings those two together, but it also brings in homages to, the Tim Burton Batman films, and other elements of the Batman mythos that I have just always wanted to see on screen. And it all feels real and lived in. And halfway through this movie, I was just sitting there kind of slack-jawed, like, I can't believe this made it to screen. And part of that immersion was actually what you guys were just talking about, which is the length. I love that this movie is 3 hours long. I do not mind a long movie. I grew up watching a little movie called The Lord of the Rings, which is all of which were 3 hours or above. And I personally feel that movies that really earn that level of immersion are well worth the investment. I know that the internet, with kind of, I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but attention spans have shortened in the era, so I feel like that's part of the reason that people aren't as willing to sit for long movies. There is a click out there that's like, all movies should be 90 minutes or less, and I'm like, no, that's not always enough time, particularly for a world building fantasy kind of immersion epic like this. But the part of the reason that I really ended up loving this movie, in addition, with the length, is the fact that it doesn't feel 3 hours long. For me, this movie flies. It just, you start off in one place with this seemingly simple, straightforward detective story, and it becomes this truly immersive crime saga that digs into the heart of what the rot that sits at the heart of Gotham and the pain that sits at the heart of Bruce Wayne / Batman. And it all comes together in a way that really feels organic and natural. And by the end of it, it's just feels like the ultimate love letter to this character. So I really love the movie for that reason and so many others.
Yeah, no, I do want to say, you mentioned Batman the Animated Series, and like one of the first things I picked up on when they started showing, maybe even before the trailers, just when like pictures were coming out, but especially that first trailer when we were getting stuff, especially between Batman and Selina Kyle, who will become, Catwoman. I was like, oh God, this feels right out of their dynamic in the animated series, which was always some of my favorite stuff, because there's that, it always was this kind of, flirtatious, interaction between the two, where it was like, if they could just get out of each other's way and get over each other's occupation, it would be like this, epic, wonderful love story. Maybe that's just the romantic in me. But I've always loved that about them. And yeah, there's a lot of that in this. And like, we're going to talk a lot about Zoe Kravitz as Selina, because she's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Blue?
I just think that the first time I watched this movie, I was really, and I am a fan of Nolan's films too. Those are really good. I do like that grittiness, but what struck me so as how this movie was different was that, oh my gosh, they're taking inspiration from some other sources here. There's obviously the Riddler is kind of seems to be, some factors of his character is based around the real life Zodiac killer, which was, never caught, kind of terrorized San Francisco area in the 1960s. A lot of similarities there. And I could talk about that later. If you're a true crime fan, you probably picked up on that one right away. But also too, there was a lot of stuff lifted, and I mean that in the nice way, from the detective thriller Seven with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. There was a lot of almost scenes that were identical. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, so if they're kind of drawing upon these things, why thematically? And these it all comes together really well thematically, and makes a lot of sense when you think about the characters of, Bruce Wayne and the Riddler, and to an extent also Selina Kyle. And I was just so struck by how this is not so much, I mean, it is an action movie. There are great action sequences, but it is almost played more like a dark, gritty detective noir thriller, where the case is unraveling. And I think the movie, because of its pacing, takes place over the course of about a week, which the movie Seven did. So it starts on Halloween and then goes from there. So I was so struck by how many inspirations were taken into this film. And it's like, wow, I don't really have to know necessarily a lot about the comic books, background. I mean, it was you get a really firm grasp on who these characters are just from this film alone.
Yeah, and I'm going to admit to something that might appall some people. I actually have not seen the entirety of the movie Seven.
It's maybe not your type of movie, John. So it's pretty dark in some places.
Oh yeah, well, some people have told me that that I like dark movies a bit too much, and they're like, why? And I'm like, oh, well, human suffering makes me feel better about my own suffering. But like, even having not seen the entire movie, I'm very aware of the tone and vibe of that. And so as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh, this is like David Fincher and, you know,
Yeah.
and Seven, in the way that like The Dark Knight took a lot of inspiration from Heat. And that's what one of the things that I really liked is when I first saw the previews for this, I was trying to like, well, didn't we already do this sort of dark and gritty, realistic Gotham in Christopher Nolan's movies? And then when I actually saw the movie, I was like, oh no, there's a very different vibe going on here. And I love that. I love that so many filmmakers are able to take these different inspirations, you know, from not just different Batman stories, but different, you know, genres of film. And, you know, and God, I swore I wasn't going to do this too much, but like in an age when, you know, there's a lot of comic book movies that are sort of aiming to be quote unquote popcorn fare, which, you know, is understandable because, you know, I think a lot of families want to be able to take their kids to go see, you know, movies based on comic book characters. But it's just so wonderful to see something like this that's, you know, and DC actually does this quite a bit. They allow their movies to go a bit darker, but to really dig into the human psyche and be willing to terrify the audience a bit. And we're getting like a lot of introspection with Batman himself over the course of this movie and what kind of symbol he needs to be. And, you know, and that moment that I alluded to a little while ago is when Gordon asks, you know, one of the, you know, the Riddler acolytes, if you will, who are you? And he goes, who am I? I'm vengeance. And the way that just rings in the ears of Batman, who has made that his mantra, and like, you know, that's who you've inspired. And like, I don't know if I think Batman movies have sort of traded in that a little bit in the past, but never has it been so direct that, no, dude, it's going to be very easy for you to inspire, you know, the wrong kind of people and be a rallying cry for the, not just the criminal element, but the really disturbed people of this city. You need to offer hope instead. And Jared, I know you're going to love this, but there's even like some crossover there with Star Wars in terms of what's been a thematic sort of not undercurrent, really overcurrent, you know, which is the don't fight what you hate, save what you love. And it's that same type of thing where he needs to be more than just, you know, beating criminals to a bloody pulp at night. He needs to be someone to show people the way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when you mentioned earlier that there was a line of dialogue that like really just crystallized this entire movie for you and really hit you in the gut, I was like, I wonder if it's the same one that it was for me. And psych, it was. But in particular, because that sequence that culminates in Batman facing down this man who's been inspired by the horrific acts of the Riddler and indirectly by Batman's own campaign for vengeance, really ultimately forces him to confront what his mission is, which at the beginning of the movie is what he says is truly what matters to him. And we, you know, you mentioned the Star Wars, like the fact that people like the power of fear and anger and vengeance, the quick and easy path as Yoda says, fear is the path to the dark side, and Batman traffics in fear. So it's easy. It's one of the appeals of the character has always been how close he is able to tread to the edge while being while still being counted among the good guys. And I think part of what I found so powerful about the ending of the movie is after we get that line of seeing Batman's own retort of "I'm vengeance," which is echoed by him and at him throughout the movie. We get that sequence where he truly becomes something more. He becomes that symbol of hope. We see him make multiple acts to sacrificial acts that could have been to save the people of the city, cutting the electric cord to save the people from being electrocuted, leading the people out of the collapsed structure and into the light. And then the moment that truly made me emotional, sincerely brought a tear to my eye, when he's saving the people on the roof afterwards, and he's carrying that young injured girl to the helicopter, and his monologue is playing over this, and he's reflecting on everything he's learned, and then he lays her down into the stretcher, and she reaches up for him and just touches his shoulder. This man who could have been a symbol of terror and vengeance, but to her he's not. To her he is more. And I feel like that's the moment that really crystallizes to him what he needs to be. That and the relationship, I say relationship even though they never share a line of dialogue together, the relationship he has with the young boy, the mayor's son, who we see in the very opening scene lose his father, and we know that carries over Bruce Wayne throughout his entire life. And who is the first person to reach for Batman when everyone is terrified of him when the stadium is flooding and the structure is collapsing? It's not the mayor, it's not the police, it's the young boy, and everyone follows their lead. And that entire sequence just tore at my heart in the best possible way.
Yeah, I just have to say, and as I was rewatching this, I was like, I should really be taking notes because there were just so many small things that I wanted to point out, and I know I'm not going to remember them all. But one thing that struck me was when one of the Riddler's messages to Batman, and of course what he's alluding to is that they're both going to meet in Arkham and be safe together, as he puts it. But when he says that I'll see you in hell, and we think of hell obviously as a descent into hell, and I just found it so amazing that in this moment at the end, and Batman does make a descent, but it's down to be an inspiring figure for the people and to save them and to help guide them out.
He literally became a beacon by lighting the stick there. So he was literally a source of light for the people. And I think that, to go back to Jared's point about the kids, you usually think of kids as being more innocent and more and more likely to trust and to put their faith into something before they've become a jaded adult. And so I think when he saw that, he also saw himself as a young boy and seeing that these are really the, of course you want to save the adults, but the kids and their future is really why he's doing this, so that kids in Gotham can have a future.
Yeah, and one of the things that this movie drives home is how much young kids can get royally screwed up as well.
Yeah.
Just
childhood trauma is abundant in this film. I mean, not just it kind of leads into actually that there's more than once, as you said, Batman is confronted with his own little tagline, "I am vengeance," and confronted with him. It's not the first time he is confronted with uncomfortable similarities between him and the Riddler. I mean, they're both orphans. They're both experienced childhood trauma. They both, the Riddler sees himself as sort of having a kinship with Batman. that they're almost like brothers in a certain way. But even at the start of the movie, we see some uncomfortable similarities already, that before he even knows who the Riddler is, it's like, Batman is not a suave billionaire. He's a recluse, and almost like too far in his own head and up his own ass, and he's in his cave and writing in his journals and detailing everything he did, and it's just like he's very limited in perspective. He's not very nice to Alfred. In some ways he's untethered, he's just kind of like bitter and sort of like trying to make his own hurt go away by keeping other people, by not only taking vengeance out on the criminal element, because his parents' killers are still unknown, just taking it out on any available criminal element, but also keeping people who he should love and who love him at a distance. So he's very much like the Riddler in a lot of ways, except the Riddler's a more extreme version. Bruce hasn't gone over that edge yet, but you get a sense, though, if he kept maybe going on this path, he might have become a lot more like the Riddler than we care to admit. I'm sorry, we were talking about children, and then I just totally hijacked
I like
that.
where you took it. Yeah. There's something that I also noticed that, like, if I had a suggestion, is like they should have leaned a little bit more into this idea of these drop heads, and this idea that there are people that are ruined by a drug, and it makes me think of the opioid crisis. And so I was thinking, when I first saw it, I thought they were going to do a little bit more with that. And also I was hoping it would be a little more nuanced and not, drug users equals losers or equals screw ups, because that's not always the case. But I think that they could have really leaned more into that, because the hopelessness and the need for a fix is like what I was really getting out of that. That there were hopeless people in Gotham, so much so that they just wanted to not be, they wanted to be completely, their mind wanted to be out of reality. But I see what they were doing. I just think it was a little too subtle for some people to pick up on, maybe.
Yeah. It's interesting, because, and that's part of what, I even talked about earlier with the way the camera kind of lingers on certain things. So I think if you're paying attention to that, it really highlights the suffering of the people throughout the city. So that's it's an interesting question about like what's too subtle for a lot of the audience coming to see a comic book film who, and now I'm being judgmental, and I don't mean to be, but like who maybe need it hammered a little bit more, but then that's also why why I love a movie like this, where it's allowed to be subtle and and for things to be there that you can pick up on. But yeah, it's
even the DA is doing the drops in the club, and it's like, he's in deep. He needs an escape from this, so I think, it kind of gives you a point just how bad this is, about how much despair there is and how much people want to escape. The people that are charged with dealing with it feel hopeless and helpless. And
oh god, and I just love this movie for how it's really it's a Batman story for our modern era, where it's like, we need to talk about how shitty corrupt police and politicians are, and it was really interesting them casting Peter Sarsgaard, because I so often really like Peter Sarsgaard, and so with him as the DA, I'm inclined to want to give him as much like benefit as I can, but he's done, horrible things, and he's covering up for other people, and he's part of that, um, he's in deep with all of that, so I can't like him, but I also feel for him as he's standing there about to be blown up. And that's the beauty of like painting these really complex human characters. It hits me that he's like, I don't care if I die, but they'll go after my family. And it's better if it's just me. So you get those moments of humanity, even with, people who are, despicable and have done bad things. And oh God, I just love it. It's so good. Which, by the way, and one thing we kind of skip by with the mention of Alfred, you guys know I was geeking out that Andy Serkis plays Alfred in this, and just when I think you can't get any better than Michael Caine as Alfred, then they give me Andy Serkis. He's not in the movie enough. I really hope he's in more in the next one.
A tad underutilized.
Yeah.
A tad. Yeah.
But I would personally argue, and people may feel differently, I think that he delivers what may be the single best cinematic Batman Alfred scene we've had. That scene by the hospital bedside, when he's confronting, when Bruce is confronting what he thinks is the tortured legacy of his father, and Alfred is trying to reassure him that no, like, the man that you've been fighting for, he was a good man, he just made a mistake. But then Bruce is forced to open up and truly admit that he was terrified of losing Alfred. As Amy said, that he was, he has spent the entire movie as being kind of mean and distant from Alfred, pushing him away. And then he has to just acknowledge that Alfred is the man who raised him, essentially, and he is the closest thing that Bruce has to a father at this point, and he cannot lose him. He does not want to lose him, and for him to open up in that way, the way we'll get more into the acting prowess of this movie, but Robert Pattinson and Andy Serkis in that scene are just devastatingly good. And that was another scene that got me emotional because, in a lot of the Batman mythos, Alfred is, just kind of there as the loyal right hand for Batman, who just knows everything, doesn't question anything. Here he does question things. Here he is trying to look out for Bruce, not just Batman. And ultimately, you see the relationship of Alfred as father figure, which I don't know gets explored enough in the cinematic realm, but here it did to brilliant effect.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see the progression that we've had with the character of Alfred over the years, and to be fair, I don't really know how it's explored in the comic books, because I've always been a bit more of a comic book adaptation watcher than I have been a comic book reader. But you go back to, like, the Tim Burton movies, and even though it's stated that Alfred is very much family to Bruce and a kind of father figure, he's still, like, he seems to represent that, the butler, and he fills that kind of a role, and more I think they've really tackled that he is a father to Bruce, and we've done that more and more, and this feels like one of the closest representations of that, where they get to have these really emotional moments together. And even, like, obviously there's the hospital scene, but even earlier when Bruce is like, Alfred, stop, you're not my father, and just the way that Andy Serkis just sort of takes that breath and goes, I'm aware. It's, oh God, it just gets you. But
he's very patient with him. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and and like, if I can just take a moment outside of this movie for a second, I'm just so glad that, you know, not to say, like, obviously all Andy Serkis's digital creations have been revolutionary, but I am really happy that he's getting more appreciation for his, you know, human skin characters between like this and also in Andor, you know, which we could go down a whole rabbit hole talking about that, because he's, if you guys haven't watched Andor, watch it. He's fantastic, as is everybody else. But you know, just as someone who grew up watching all those Lord of the Rings documentaries and seeing him give interviews and stuff and work behind the scenes, it's just great to see, yeah, the man in the flesh getting the props he deserves, because he doesn't do a whole lot in this movie, but he's very, very good. But no, Jared, you were talking about the hospital scene, and what I liked about that moment is that it's not shying away from the fact that Bruce's father made a absolutely terrible mistake, and something that he probably should have, you know, Alfred says, you know, he should have known, you know, that it would turn out that way, but he didn't. And so it's not quite letting him off the hook, but it's also like a reaffirmation that at his heart, Thomas was a good man, and he, you know, and he was going to, you know, obviously was going to take responsibility for everything that happened. And there's nobody quite like Andy Serkis to make that pill go down easy, and and he's a very reassuring voice.
I thought it also was interesting how it that scene introduced the history of very serious mental illness in Bruce's family, violent and an element of criminality, because I think they said that his grandmother shot his grandfather or something like that, and she had some mental illness issues, and then his mother also had some on and off again very serious bouts with some mental illness that, you know, and of course we can kind of understand why Thomas would want this covered up, not because of his reputation, but because of the horrible stigma that would be used to tar his wife with because of her illness. And I think I want to say it doesn't really show it too much in this movie, but I want to say that may introduce in the future Bruce having a different perspective on mental illness and the criminal element going forward. I'm guessing, but yeah, I like that scene a lot, because it opens Bruce kind of starts out very judgmental and kind of black and white thinking about criminality. And he's
he gets called out on it too.
He gets called out on it. I think Selina does a very good job of that. But I think it's like having these experiences and having his family history kind of like revealed to him. It kind of, you know, probably opens up a little bit more of a compassionate nature, even though they must be stopped. But there is, you know, it probably opens up some understanding, and probably is a little bit enlightening to some of his proclivities at the beginning of the movie of being very isolationist, reclusive, too into the whole Batman thing and not being tethered to relationships and to be grounded. I mean, he could have very easily have with his family history, could have eventually at some point spiraled like the Riddler.
And something else that I want to mention about the depiction of Bruce in this movie, because so often, and I thought this was brilliant, because so often, you know, there's the image of Bruce Wayne that's, you know, held up and is what Alfred kind of wants him to do throughout this movie, to kind of shield him from, you know, people saying like, you know, hey, he might be Batman. It's to make sure that he's giving off this impression of like being a playboy and doing, sort of all these wild things that you expect a young rich
like in the Nolan version,
Yeah, but in this, it's like he is so like down in the dumps, and the perception is that he doesn't care about anything or anybody but himself, really, and that in turn makes him the last one that anyone would suspect. So I thought it was a sort of brilliant way to invert that that sort of standard Batman trope.
It's probably a little bit more realistic of how somebody who spends all their time is like almost like a quote unquote basement dweller, and being so socially inept. Like it's especially when he's obviously has the hots for Selina, and he's such a freaking doofus. Like it's almost comical to watch. But
well, and this time it's funny because the first time I saw this, I'm sort of I'll admit to like not objectively viewing like every beat of like what he's doing, because the whole time I'm kind of like I'm entranced by Zoe Kravitz as Selina. So we're kind of
we all boat. Were, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And then this time I'm watching, I'm like, dude, you're like looking at her through your binoculars as she goes in the bedroom. It's like not cool, man, not cool.
No, not cool.
This is, I don't mean to like bring it down, but I really did want to go back to criminality and mental health and say that we want to divorce the two, because there are tons of criminals that are neurotypical that do not have a serious mental illness. But speaking as someone with a serious mental illness, if someone is in an episode, they're not able necessarily to make the right decisions, and also they may not even remember it later. There was stuff I did during my manic episode 2 years ago that I don't remember. So I'm not saying this excuses anything they do. I'm trying to say that we need to have a more nuanced view of serious mental illness, and we need to have a more view focused on rehabilitation instead of jailing people for and a lot of people say, oh, then serial killers are going to fake like they're crazy and get sent to a mental hospital instead of jail, but I think that we can really look past that and look for having some compassion for people with serious mental illness. And I think that the Joker in particular, I very much shy away from that character because they're trying to play with the idea of being crazy, but they're not at all doing it in a way that shows that people with serious mental illnesses are also people, and that they deserve to be taken care of, but they don't it just makes me think of like the thing that New York City is doing, which is basically putting all homeless people with mental illnesses directly into like hospitalizing them automatically. And there are things like that where, hospitalization isn't necessarily a good idea for everyone. It causes a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so there is this idea of, we just need to put these people in a facility. And with medication and with counseling, even schizophrenics can have a normal life. So I really just want to emphasize that the Riddler is unmedicated. He's uncounseled. He has a lot of high school trauma. I'm talking about myself, apparently, childhood trauma. And so he could have easily, I think that the Batman is a reaction to childhood trauma, and the Riddler as a persona was also a reaction. And my therapist always says there is no healthy reaction to childhood trauma, right? There's always going to be destructive. And so I think that the line between, being this cool, badass vigilante and being a crazy person who wears a bat suit and runs around all day is, at night, is a little thin. There's a thin line there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's such an important point, Amy. And it's one.
Oh, I prefer AR now, Jared.
AR. Okay. Oh, not a problem. But basically, that is one of the defining elements throughout the Batman mythos, because so many of his villains are quote unquote insane. Because a lot of them are not superpowered, like Batman does not have superpowers. So they are in so many ways meant to be dark reflections of him. The Joker being the arch example of that, because I mean, I personally feel that while the Joker is classified as insane, I feel like he chooses to be this way, in a way that most like mentally ill people do not have that choice. It's almost like a mask for him. He like is truly, he's using it almost as an excuse to do the psychotic things he would almost be doing anyway. And what's interesting about the Riddler is he is, you know, we get that great confrontation scene between him and Bruce and the Batman in the jail cell, where the Riddler talks about what it is to be an orphan, and he uses Bruce Wayne as kind of a mirror, and he mocks the idea that Bruce, who went through real childhood trauma, his parents being murdered right in front of him, growing up as an orphan because he ultimately was still a billionaire who had a support system, whereas Edward Nygma was an orphan who had to live 30 kids to a room in a rat-infested orphanage, freezing to death every winter, and you can see how that shaped him. But the Riddler's perspective is ultimately not the correct perspective there. It's one that people like, you feel for him and what he suffered, but then you see what he became, what he ultimately chose to become, because you see like later or earlier in the movie where he talks about his life being a cruel riddle that he cannot solve, but then he has the line, I see now what I must become. So you know that he made an active choice in that way. And
yeah,
but he also, you know, that doesn't mean he doesn't have them, like he couldn't have been helped, but it's an interesting idea of when the line gets crossed. And clearly, you know, the Riddler's actions in this movie are morally reprehensible, and that I would argue that that's not necessarily a reflection on him as someone who had like, it's not a reflection on mentally ill people as a whole. It is a reflection of this character and what he chose to do with his trauma in. And could he have been helped? I think he could have, but he is also, you know, at a certain point, he crossed the line, as Bruce did, as he could have. And Bruce, the part of the power of the Batman character is that ultimately he chooses not to cross that line. That is where his no kill rule comes from. And, you know, it's a hard thing for any movie to tackle a topic as serious as mental illness, and the stories that you were sharing, AR, are ones that I think movies would do better to reckon with when they are attempting to portray such characters, because it is so easy to fall into stereotypes of the laughing, maniacal, insane villain. And I feel this movie did it better than most, but is it perfect? Absolutely not. So that's why your perspective is so important
here. Yeah. And I will say that I'm not going to say much on it because I'm not very well, you know, educated to be, you know, saying too much, but yeah, it's a conversation to be had about like the Riddler and how much he chooses, you know, versus it's clear that this is a society that has failed him and has failed many others. And I think that's part of the point.
It's very evident in his fan base. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And yeah, and it's because he exists and so many others do, especially among his followers, that they exist in the society that will, you know, have all this compassion for, you know, a young son of, you know, a billionaire, because as you know, as the Riddler says, that makes the pill go down easier because he's rich. And then will it, which, you know, I'm not saying it's like, obviously compassion should have been had for Bruce completely because he went through a lot of trauma, but at the same time they're completely ignoring you know, this other part of society, these kids that apparently nobody really cares about. And that is part of what has led to the Riddler and who he is. Like I said, there, you can have there's a very nuanced discussion to be had about how much is a result of that, how much is a result of a choice that he makes. I don't think I'm well suited to, you know, to completely dissect that, but that's part of why this movie is so fascinating, because it is presenting that, and it's not just, oh, he's doing all these things because he's crazy and that's about as much as we're going to dive into it. I think it presents a lot of complexities. So yeah, with that, I'll shut up lest I say something stupid that you know. But yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if I may go back to just like I kind of see some of the similarities here with the movie Seven, and you know, the character of John Doe is Kevin Spacey's character. Spoiler alert, the villain, where like they have a line in that movie where it'd just be easy to write him off as crazy, you know. Like he is methodical. These things are well thought out. They're, you know, planned meticulously. That's not the definition of crazy. So there is probably, you know what I mean? Like, but it's not, it's very functional and logical in a lot of ways, even though it's morally reprehensible. So there is aspects of what the Riddler does that are very logical to him and meticulously thought out in his crimes, which seem to be separate from any mental illness he may be suffering from. But like, that's why I kind of like comparing it to the like going back to Seven a little bit and comparing the characters, because it kind of like gives kind of some clues there as to what, you know, might be going on. Whereas, you know, I do see a lot of similarities with the character of Morgan Freeman's character, Detective Somerset, and Batman, and Detective Mills, which is Brad Pitt's character, and Selina.
Oh, is that someone you know, AR?
It's my boo.
Oh, nice. Hey. Welcome.
Oh, it's so wonderful to see you, especially after we heard a lot about you. I'm going to say thank you very much for making this person very, very happy. But yeah, sorry. Did you have?
No, I'm sorry. We'll keep going.
If I could just say one thing,
sure.
You mentioned true crime, and I see a ton of Edmund Kemper in him. Because you can tell he wanted to be caught. Edmund Kemper turned himself into the police. He also loves to talk, and boy, does Edmund Kemper love to talk and tell you all about what he did, what his thinking was. And Edmund Kemper also was very OCD, and I think that it's very obvious that the Riddler has obsessive compulsive disorder. He has to have, right when he goes, no, he gets frustrated. It was supposed to be this way. It had to be this way. His plan didn't go exactly that way, and I think he has this idea in his head. He has a fantasy of what he wants, right? And he tries to create that. And that is this idea of people with mental illnesses often having delusions about themselves, and often having delusions of grandeur in particular, thinking that they're greater than they are. And so I think that is feeding into what appears to be a masterminded plan, all this, and this idea that, oh, well, you know, crazy people are disorganized. And that's not true. I was going to grad school while I was unmedicated bipolar. I got a master's, you know, so we can be very functional. And that idea of, you know, societal inequality of who gets help and who doesn't, it really shows how the rich, right, can get that help that they need, or they can fund their own vigilante operation to deal with their own childhood trauma. So there's this idea that no one was there for him, and that even if, you know, and that Edmund Kemper felt that way about his mother. He felt like she wasn't really there for him. He ended up killing her. So I think that there's a lot of true crime elements to it going on, because it is in the end, it's a superhero story about crime, right? About the crime in Gotham and about how different people react to that.
Yeah,
thank you for your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think this was said already, but you are much, you know, more equipped to, you know, to talk about that than any of us. So I thank you, AR, and like I was just looking forward to having you on this stream because I missed you.
I know, I missed you too.
But it's really great to have your perspective on this as well. And by the way, I did want to throw up. I grabbed a picture of Paul Dano in this movie. He is like, oh god, he's just so good. And I love the fact that you don't even really see his face until that moment in the diner, you know, which, you know, I knew it was him because I'm familiar with his work and I saw him in the press leading up to this movie. But I just imagine like not knowing it was him and then getting to that moment in the diner, and I would have been like, oh, of course it's freaking Paul Dano. very, very talented, but he often plays some very out there characters. I don't know how many of you have seen There Will Be Blood, but
I have. It's excellent.
Yeah, I mean that whole final scene with him and Daniel Day-Lewis, it's one for the books. It's great. But yeah, unless anybody has something they wanted to get out right now, I'm going to go ahead and do the mid-roll now and get it out of the way. Are we at a good break point?
Okay. I think so.
Cool. So yeah, everybody, I'm back, and you know we're going full steam ahead for now. I'm going to allow myself to take some more breaks than I did in the past because if you didn't notice, I was gone for a year, and part of that was personal things that were going on, but the other part of it was that I had burnt myself out when I was doing it more on a regular basis. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. But for now, we're going ahead, and next week we had to do some reorganizing. Because and I swear to God, I'm not picking on you, Blue. I had thought that I had checked with you beforehand, and then I was like, oh wait, I think I might be taking that for granted. So then I messaged you, and you were like, no, actually, I'm not available, and I'm like, oh shit. But next week. Yeah, no, it's all me. That's the point I'm getting across. No, so next week I'm going to have AK is coming back, and so is this lovely person next to me, and we are actually I've landed on we're discussing Kill Bill Volume 1. Which is great because AR, you and I got to do a Quentin Tarantino stream, which was such a, like, it turned out good, but it was a dumb idea because
we get 20 minutes for each movie, and it's just
and our prep was that we had to watch like 5 movies or something.
Oh yeah, we had marathons.
Like, why did we do that? 5 movies for one stream? That defies all logic.
We're masochistic, so
we were trying out some stuff, but anyway. So this time around, I mean, if that stream showed me anything, it's that I really wanted to focus in on each individual, Tarantino movie. Although some of them were a little easier to discuss than others for us. I'm veering off of topic here, but I'm just saying I'm going to be a bit more methodical in who I invite on for some of those discussions because, Like, I don't think it would have been a smart idea for you and I to by ourselves tackle Django and the Hateful Eight.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to recognize our white privilege right there and be like, the fact that we think, for a second that we could talk about it is no bueno.
Yeah,
so.
when we got to the second half of that stream, I was like, ooh. Yeah. But anyway, I think we're good for Kill Bill though, and yeah. So AK is coming on for that, and then you're going to be on, but also you're coming back a couple weeks later because I think it's on the 27th.
Yes.
We're having a special AR birthday stream, and we're going to be talking about the Disney animated classic Mulan, which happens to be your favorite movie.
Yes, happens to be my favorite Disney movie. And for those of you that don't know, I have an MA in Chinese Studies. So we're going to talk all things representation of Chinese culture. And I'm not going to just be saying what's right and what's wrong. I'm going to more be talking about like the larger themes that they're playing on and having to do with classical Chinese storytelling and poetry.
But you will also be singing songs.
I will also be singing quite a bit, yes.
Good. So yeah, and I can probably tease a bit out some stuff that's coming ahead, because normally, like, if you're smart, you only announce the stuff that's like absolutely planned out and coming right up the following week. But me, I just get too excited. So the week after next, I am actually having my good friend Aaron M come on the channel, and we're going to be talking about the Martin Campbell 1998 film, The Mask of Zorro, which has to be like one of my favorite popcorn movies of all time. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and to having Aaron back on the channel, because those have been some of my favorite times. We've done some great conversations. Her and I have talked about Stardust. We've talked about A Knight's Tale.
The Knight's Tale one was really fun.
And you know what? I'm noticing a trend, because her and I get to talk about like the really fun, like popcorn, like the movies that if I'm trying to remember about Erin, she doesn't like to get too sad in her movie choices, so I think that's borne out by the streams that we've done. But she is a Game of Thrones fan, like the rest of us, so so she does allow herself to dip into the dark stuff occasionally. Anyway, so yeah, next week will be Kill Bill Volume 1, and then Master of Zorro and Mulan in the weeks to come. And I've got a whole bunch of other stuff planned. In Blue, when you're next available, you, me, and AK are going to be talking some video game adaptation classics.
Yes.
For those who don't know, we have it planned out to do both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
Nice.
And yes, I'm talking about the 90s iterations,
yes,
with Street Fighter with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Mortal Kombat with Christopher Lambert, among other high quality,
just good, stupid fun.
So yeah. Okay, so I've talked enough about what's coming up on this channel. I'm just going to toss the net out there. Any of you guys working on anything that you want to share? Blue, I was told by a certain somebody to pressure you maybe into doing some work for your own podcast.
That's coming. Oh man, I've been called out.
I won't say who said that, because I'm sure it's a big mystery.
Oh, it's a huge mystery. No. Let me just send a quick text message.
Okay. So yeah, Yeah, and Jared, as of yet, you don't have your own channel, but as one of the biggest positive voices for Star Wars and fandom out there, I maintain that you should start something up. But
you know what? I'm hopeful that someday I will have the time. I mentioned that I'm going to be graduating from residency within the next 2 months. Maybe once I know I'll reliably have weekends to myself going forward, I might be able to dream something up.
Yeah.
But for now,
Because
I just
I
stick to
mean,
my Twitter account.
right? You seem to insist that your career in medicine is somehow more important than
like saving
talking
lives is
on
not
YouTube.
enough. He needs a YouTube channel on top of that.
Yeah, I've got to also do that.
Well, the thing you will find out if you ever hang out with anyone who is a doctor or in the medical field is when we get together, what we talk about is work. So I always relish the opportunity to escape and talk about some of my other interests as well. I just haven't had the opportunity to do that in a more organized fashion, which is why I'm always so honored and grateful when you or Steven or anybody else, ask me onto your platform to talk about these things that we love.
Speaking of which, just I'm always one to spring an invite while we're actually, streaming live. I have to imagine that's probably next week. Although I imagine I should talk to Steven first. Stephen and Nessie. I imagine we're going to do a stream on the new season of Star Wars Visions. Could I interest you in that?
You very much could. I've been it just came out this last Thursday. I've been saving it because I really wanted to delve into each and every one of those shorts individually and give them the time and the thought that they deserve, because it is such a cool project that Star Wars is undertaking. And I really loved having the opportunity to talk about the first half of the last season of Visions with you guys. So yeah, let's run it back.
Yeah, I know. I've also been sort of taking my time with each one because like each film is such a personal expression from those filmmakers and those cultures that I'm like, I don't want them all to run together into like, one season of shorts. I want to appreciate each one for its unique excellence. And so I've watched the first 3 so far, and they've each been fantastic.
Yeah,
Can I do some plugs real quick, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, everyone, follow me on Twitter at Amy Blackfire, AEMY, and then Blackfire with a Y. And yeah, I don't necessarily create that much content anymore, but I did come out a couple months ago with an essay about Aswaf and Hua Mulan, right? The legend of Mulan, and how that is similar to brave Danny Flint from the Aswaf universe, as well as some Liana stuff going on. So I talk a lot about that. And I'm going to be guesting now on people's channels, not just John, hopefully. Though I would be happy just to talk movies all the time with you. But yeah, so I will be putting some stuff out there. So if you follow me on Twitter, I also show lots of pictures of my cute dog, Mushroom, who is named after Mushroom from Fire and Blood. It is not about the drugs. Everyone always thinks it's like magic mushrooms. That's not what I named him after. So yeah, I do some fun stuff on my Twitter. So check that out. And during Ice and Fire Con, I did a little virtual space hangout on Twitter. And that went really well, and that was fun. So I might start opening more Twitter spaces for people to talk Game of Thrones and hang out and share in each other's misery that we're not together, all together. So
yeah, I'm glad you did that, and I was excited to see that for you and for other people who couldn't make it. Although I will say I even said to a couple of our friends while we were at Ice and Fire Con, I was like, this would just the thing that is missing is that AR is not here, and it's cruel that we still haven't been together in person somewhere.
I know.
After all these years.
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy.
But
we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So yeah. Unless anybody else has anything else, let's jump back in. we need to talk about Miss Zoe Kravitz as Selina Kyle, because like I will say, side a digression before we actually get to her. I, like many people, was kind of what's the word? Not suspicious, but skeptical. There you go. Skeptical about Mr. Robert Pattinson as Batman, because and that's was stupidity on my part, because I think, like a lot of people, I mostly know him from Twilight, which I haven't actually seen myself. but
neither is half of the internet, and yet they have the whole impression that thing bad. So.
Exactly. So I'm part of bad internet in this case. But he has done a lot of other stuff that has been extraordinarily well received. So I should have known better. I thought he was fantastic as Bruce Wayne and Batman in this. And he didn't put on don't get me wrong, I love Christopher Nolan's Batman movies and I love Christian Bale, but I'm really glad that Robert Pattinson did not put on an overly aggressive Batman voice.
Yeah, the voice has been retired, at least for this movie, and I was very happy. Could we talk about his eyes, though? Because, a lot of scenes was just him literally staring, and yet I got, all these emotions from him just staring. And his eyes are more pronounced because of the black paint, too. Yeah. So, the eyes being the windows to the soul.
I do want to say there was a reason why I brought up Robert Pattinson, because it was just a way into saying, as phenomenal as he is, Zoe kind of stole the show. But let's talk about Robert, since we're talking about him. Impressed the hell out of me. And I love the fact that they really showed that, I remember from back in the Tim Burton movies, it's they'd have the makeup for his eyes, when he had the mask on, and then as soon as it came off, it's just plain old Michael Keaton. It's
that's a little off.
So they actually show him with all the eye makeup and everything all over.
You are so right, AR, about him doing so much acting with his eyes alone. They were doing a lot of heavy lifting, okay? Because if you notice, there was of course he's doing that intense brooding stare a lot of the times, and can put the fear of God into these into criminals. But the second that he's dealing with Selina, it's almost like his eyes just go for deer in the headlights. He's so intimidated by her in some ways, and he's trying desperately not to show it, but then he comes out course correcting and coming out a little too harsh, and it's I just love how inept he is sometimes.
I know. Well, his immaturity really comes out when he's around Selina. It's he's just this young boy with a crush.
Yeah, I can't. Just watching that film again, and their first, I guess you would call it, fight scene together, where she's breaking into that safe and then he confronts her. And then of course they have that fight, and then it ends with her doing that flip off a staircase, and then her legs wrap around his waist, and then he pivots and then throws her on the table. Lord.
And there's that. Okay, this is just gonna be the thirsty part of the stream.
Yeah, this is gonna be very thirsty from here on out.
There's that pause in the fight when somebody's coming in, and he's holding her against him, and the music is working in tandem with just the breathing of their bodies. Mm-hmm. It's oh wow.
The chemistry was fire between these two, absolute fire.
No, it was. I lost count of the number of scenes that I was just blown away by just how much electricity the two of them had together. And they, part of it comes from the fact that they have this adversarial relationship that is kind of baked into the Batman Catwoman kind of characters. Batman, unlike Superman or Spider-Man, he doesn't have the one defined love interest in Lois Lane or Mary Jane, but I would personally argue that consistently across the mythos, Selina Kyle is his most enduring, like, romantic foil, and it's for this reason, because they find themselves on opposite sides, but they're so intrinsically drawn to one another, and that chemistry that Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson created, it's not something you can fake.
Right.
You just, like, you could tell that from the moment they arrived on screen together, they just clicked. And even when they were, trying to kick each other's ass, you were just like, this is hot. Can you go back to kissing? And then when they do kiss, it's absolutely like the most hell yes moment of the movie so far for me. And then it makes it even more satisfying when they go and they are teaming up together, because you can see the potential of what this could be. And it's why it's ultimately so heartbreaking at the end when, they feel like they need to go their separate ways. But if this franchise ends up becoming a trilogy, which it seems like it will, I have hopes that, we'll see them together again, because I really hope this wasn't a one-off. This was just, this was like electric. And there have been a ton of great actresses who have played Catwoman over the years, from, the originals, from Eartha Kitt to, Michelle Pfeiffer, obviously iconic. I'm a big fan of Anne Hathaway's performance. I know not everyone is, but Zoe Kravitz was my favorite on-screen Catwoman so far. I just thought she was dynamite in every way.
Yeah. No one, like, just because I was like, I was still a bit on the young side, but definitely aware of things when Batman Returns came out, or I should rather say that movie probably helped make me aware of certain things. So like nobody's ever going to be able to touch, Michelle Pfeiffer for me, but Zoe Kravitz was without a doubt like my favorite Catwoman, since her. Yeah, it's just, she was fantastic. And yeah, like I would argue that you really need that chemistry between the actors playing Batman and Catwoman, and it's just like part of the DNA of the story. And I told AR this, like when we were chatting earlier, like Batman stories are always so much better when Selina Kyle is there, because just the I'm gonna say it, the sexual tension between those characters is just right. Like even as a kid watching Batman the animated series, I got that. And that was a show, like, even though it was adult for what it was, but still aimed at kids. But it's like, no, these two characters want each other. And that was just part of it.
I like the dynamic of them both being martial artists and vigilante, this kind of like, not vigilante because she's kind of, doing her own thing, like cool cat burglar over there. Yeah. But I think that that's interesting. And I find that as a love interest really cool. It's kind of like with another DC example would be Green Arrow and Black Canary, right? They're both like kick-ass people. And so I think with Selina Kyle being this well-trained and like really strong, I think that it kind of ups the like more like equal between them, because I feel like with Superman it's Lois Lane, he needs to save her constantly, and in this they save each other constantly, right? You think, oh, he's done for, and then she comes in. You think, oh, she's done for, and then he comes in, right? So it's kind of this like dynamic of they both could be good on their own, but if they would just work together, they could really make a difference in the city. So it's really sad when you see them part ways at the end.
And I brought this up earlier, but I really love how she calls him out in this movie, especially, when he is passing judgment on, on, her friend, the woman who's murdered. Or I should be clear, like the movie doesn't say are they friends, or was it something else?
Doesn't she say honey or baby?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that they have. I mean, what's on screen is on screen, but I think they've made it clear that they are meant to be a romantic couple.
Okay.
Selina and Annika.
They were roommates.
Really good friends. Real good.
I didn't want to say that definitively, but then also I heard myself say her friend, and I'm like, oh god.
Oh no.
It's like that whole meme of they were really good friends. So,
I think it was pretty obvious that she was queer coded. And I really appreciated that. Because it was nice to see, she might be bisexual, she might be pan, she might be questioning. There are all sorts of possibilities. And I don't think a label is really important at this, stage, especially for her character. You would say, oh, it doesn't really matter, but it kind of does, because not only was Annika seen as a thrown away woman because of being, kind of like a club hostess, but she was seen as thrown away because she was also international. It's xenophobic, right? To take away her passport, that's really abuse to someone who's from another country.
I do want to say that I feel a bit like Steven saying, I do enjoy the hip hop.
I do enjoy the hip hop. But one more thing, I just want to finish my thought is that, she basically, Annika is also then seen as thrown away because she is queer, right? She's not fully a straight woman. So therefore, she's seen as more disposable. So I think it adds an extra element to it to have Annika and Selina Kyle be like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes me kind of excited because it's nice to see, two women just together, and they have all the cats. I mean, come on, it's obvious what's going on here.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. It feels so dumb because it just wasn't definitively said on screen. So I wanted.
John is like, I do have the gaydar.
Like, anyway, so yeah, I'm glad that was the consensus, because like that was my read on it, but I just wasn't sure. So yeah, okay, sorry, embarrassing moment for John. Like, we're moving past it. But anyway, so what was I saying? No, so Bruce was sort of passing judgment on like her life choices, as he put it, and then he's like, and then she says, whoever you are, you grew up rich, and it's like, yeah, he did.
Yeah, like, where are all these choices that she had that were available to her? She's an immigrant, she's young, she's poor, she does not have a lot of resources. Her passport was taken away. Where exactly are all these choices that she had?
Yeah.
And so she happened to, unfortunately, because there's not any available help for someone in her position, the next available person to help her is the criminal element in the underworld. So how's a girl supposed to get by,
Which, by the way, Falcone is the worst possible scumbag in a world full of scumbags.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, we've been talking about like all these villains who have even like certain past trauma, and that made them who they are. Even the Penguin, who we haven't really touched on yet, that he clearly has, issues that are going on underneath. But Falcone is, and I'm sure that something made him the way he is, but he is presented as the one like morally irredeemable character in the movie. And I found it such a fascinating choice, which is that they chose to make him Selina's father, because that is actually not something that is canonical in the comics. But it really helped play into the idea of that, we talked about Bruce as an orphan. We talked about Edward Nygma, the Riddler, as an orphan. Selina is kind of an orphan too, because, her defining trauma is that she lost her mother. Her mother was murdered at a very young age. And while her father is technically still alive, he clearly had no interest in her beyond her maybe her use as a commodity. And he professes to have affection for her. He's always calling her, by affectionate names and saying, oh, come see me. But when she really needed him, he was not there for her. And she carries that weight with him and that with her throughout the movie. And when the revelation ultimately comes out of just how foul and deep into it he is. Not only is he the rat that this entire case is based on, not only is he the one who murdered Maria Kyle, it's pretty heavily implied, and murdered Annika, but he just is like, he's at the center of it all. He is, as Kenzie, the corrupt cop, says, like, he's been the mayor for 20 years and no one can do a damn thing about it. And that's really what drives Selina, that, to stop thinking as, I just want to get my score and get out. That's when she makes a decision to go for something, to go for him, to get what she believes she is owed, and to kill him. But another scene that I found so incredibly powerful in the movie was after she confronts him, after she attempts to kill him and fails, and he's going to kill her, and Bruce does step in and save her, and she's going to execute Falcone, and Bruce stops her. And, did he have the right to do that? Perhaps, perhaps not. But the line that I really found so powerful was when, she says he has to pay, and Bruce says, you don't have to pay with him. You've paid enough. And that really broke through, I thought, as something that, Selina ultimately gets to make her choice, that she gets to move beyond Falcone. And this man who was her father, but never defined her, never had that true relationship with her. And then ultimately she is able to leave him behind. And yes, part that's made easier by the fact that the Riddler shoots him in the next scene. But, even if that had not happened, I feel like Selina would have, been able to move beyond to her next step, not beyond her trauma, but whatever she needed next in her life after that scene.
Yeah. And, I do want to say, like, quick little side note. I put up that picture of Falcone, played by the great John Turturro, who, like, I'm so used to watching him in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And so then I see him in something like this, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for him to go, do not seek the treasure. But no, that scene where he's, up in his like penthouse or whatever, playing pool, and there's the Johnny Fontaine song from The Godfather playing. I'm just like, really? Like, I'm not sure what I want to prefer, that like this is taking place in the same world as The Godfather, or that he's playing the soundtrack to The Godfather. Because the latter one really endears me to him, even though he's a horrible person. But anyway, sorry, had to get that out of the way. You mentioned Colin Farrell, who we haven't talked about yet, the unrecognizable Colin Farrell as the Penguin, and like, and I can't wait for the series that's coming out with him in it, because like, this is the kind of cinematic universe I can get behind. Yeah, let's have TV show expansions on these, despicable characters from this world. But he's so good, like, and even buried underneath all that makeup, like, there's no mistaking those eyes, yeah, he's just great. Let me see. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of him somewhere. Yeah, I'm looking. I'll come across it at some point. but yeah, no, it's just that scene where Gordon and Batman, when we're going to talk about Gordon as well, when they like suspect him as the rat, and they have him, handcuffed, and they're questioning him, and it's so great because he gets to call them out. Oh, what a team you two are. And yeah, I just love all this. So, like, the car chase and all that. He's like, you think you can come at me, vengeance, and all his stuff. And then when he's like, I got you, and no, you didn't.
But I gotta say, this is just an offhand comment, but the car chase was really relatable because of the traffic. I was like, I'm in Southern California, so I was like, you're not gonna get far unless you're on a motorcycle because of the traffic. Yeah. Like, why are you running in this big city with all this traffic? Like, obviously you're not gonna get very far. So when I saw that, I was like, yeah, same man, same.
No, we love to dive into the deeper themes here, but just on a pure visceral, that was bleeping awesome level. Hey, that car chase is so cool. It's so well done.
Yeah.
Just like from the moment that Batman gets into the car and the Penguin is has Catwoman pinned down, and then Bruce starts revving the engine, and you can slowly see Penguin's face go from anger and rage to just sheer pants-splitting terror, and then he just takes off, and Bruce races after him. And then the score, which, John, you're the score. I'm sure we're going to talk about the score, but the score in that scene is phenomenal. And culminating in that moment where, as you alluded to, the tractor trailer explodes and Penguin is cackling because he thinks he's got him. And then the scene that was in the trailer, the scene that hooked everyone, where Bruce's Batmobile tears through the fire and lands, and you can just see the Penguin heart leave his body, and then Bruce slams into him and the car does 12 flips over, and Penguin survives because it's a comic book movie. but and then he sees the upside down slot of Bruce coming toward him. Like, that scene was in the trailer, and it I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, I don't know how the movie can live up to this. And then
the music.
And the mark of a truly great scene is you see it in the trailer and then you see it in the movie and you're like, that was even better. It was so good.
It also wasn't the only action, there's other action. Whenever I watch a trailer and I see one scene, and I'm like, oh, and then I go see it, and I'm like, wait, was that the only action scene? There was a lot going on with the Batman. There was a lot of good really well choreographed fight scenes, by the way. Whoever did the fight scene choreography was just on top. My favorite was whenever the Batman was fighting guys, of course, with guns. They always have guns and shoot at him. That's their thing. But as he was fighting them, it was dark and you could only see him whenever the gun was shot.
Yeah.
And that was really cool because you see him over here and it's and then you don't see him. And then you see him again and he's all the way over here now, and it's just wow. I mean, I know that they had to really get a lot of things lined up to get that as well as they did.
Yeah. And that really plays into Batman's strengths as a character, as a, martial artist, and because part of the reason he is so successful is he doesn't just line up the thugs and punch them one at a time. He uses the darkness, he uses the shadows. This is something that another one of my favorite Batman influences is the Arkham Asylum games, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight. And the way you play those games, you are rewarded not for just charging in and kicking the enemy's asses because they have guns, they'll shoot you. You're rewarded for using the shadows, using the rafters, lunging out of the darkness, using fear to incapacitate the enemies. And I think that sequence that AR alluded to is a classic example of that realized on screen.
Yeah, no, and just talking about the shadows, this reminded me of something that I wanted to mention, that the very beginning of the movie, just his monologue and again, talking about that score, the way the score built. I love the simplicity of the main theme, where it just starts off where it's dum, 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 and then it just keeps rising until the full orchestra is playing, but where he's talking about, I have to pick my targets carefully, and it's they think I'm hiding in the shadows, but I am the shadows. And oh god, it's just so good. Which of course is sort of that whole opening speech is the antithesis of where he kind of ends up. but it's still written great, and it's still, you know, very evocative.
They also in this, not really the original score, but they made in the soundtrack, they made very good use of Nirvana's "Something in the Way."
Oh, it was brilliant. I love that song.
Yeah, that was brilliant when they played it over the scene in the first part of the movie with the orphan. And then they reprised it again later on in the movie, I think towards the end where he's rescuing the people. And then of course there's the scene with the kid that holds onto his arm. And yeah, so brilliant use of that song.
Like, even for someone who will be like, yes, but it's not an original score. I was like, oh my God, like, and I'm not even like, that's not my usual sort of brand of music, but so brilliantly used. It's
yeah. I mean, thematically it works very well because it's a song. I mean, and while people have said that this isn't exactly a true story, it was a song about being supposedly about Kurt Cobain being his parents kicking him out, and he supposedly lived under a bridge, and about the, you know, being discarded and alone. And but you know, it's more like you don't want the truth to get in the way of a good story, you know, like, so it's kind of, it's a very poignant song for those types of scenes, but how it gets reprised later on and it flips around in a way of where, you know, Batman isn't this figure to be feared because the people don't know him. In the beginning of the movie, like he saves that man from the gang members, but he's afraid. Like, that man is afraid of him because he doesn't know him or understand him or what he's about. And you know, he could just as easily be there to kill or rob him as well. And it's like the way Batman is being viewed by the city is changing, and he's no longer, I guess in that sense, isolated. He's now part of the city and part of this community, you know.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite juxtapositions, where, you know, you go from having that man be terrified of him, you know, and like, and Batman not even trying to, like, not even bothering to try to reassure him, you know, and be like, it's okay, you know, I'm here to save you. None of that. He's just comfortable with creating this terrifying.
I have my persona I have to maintain.
People to fear. And and to go from that to, at the end of the movie, that evolution that he has, where, you know, he'll take somebody's, you know, hand and comfort them. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, AR.
Yeah, I just was going to bounce off of the Nirvana idea and think about how Kurt Cobain was a very tortured person and dealt with mental health issues. He definitely had MDD, major depressive disorder. A lot of people think it might have been bipolar depression. He might have been, because he had highs and lows. He would have highs where he would like write 5 songs, you know, in like a day. And then he would have lows where he wouldn't write for a while. So he was a very internalized, tortured person. And I definitely think Bruce Wayne when I think of that, especially the way that Robert Pattinson is portraying him here. So I think it's a little bit of a shout out to kind of how also mental illness creates art as well. Because, you know, we wouldn't be so interested in this guy who's in this costume, you know, if he didn't have a backstory that affected his psyche and affected the way that he sees Gotham and the world. And I think that that's really interesting, and that we have Kurt Cobain, a singer who really was able to create art through his mental illness. And then we have the Batman, who I think does suffer from depression, to have him going out there. And I think that saving the world and everything, you know, not saving the world, but saving Gotham, he's trying to save himself in doing so.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, just looking at, you know, Bruce as having depression, it just, like, once again, it drives home this, you know, this image of him as, like, you know, he says it point blank, I don't care what happens to me, like, you know, and he says it as like, I'm on this mission, you know, and I have this goal to, you know, to rid Gotham of the criminal elements and all this, but really he doesn't care because he's hopelessly depressed and hasn't gotten past his parents' murder. And of course, that just makes an amazingly fascinating character, and goes back to what I was saying earlier about the way they've chosen to have, not just to portray Bruce, but have Bruce portray himself. It's it's that depressed element, like that's always a part of Bruce Wayne, but it's usually on the interior, and like in this movie it's completely on the exterior. He's not even like trying to hide it like in other adaptations, and he doesn't realize how far gone he is. He even, like in that scene with Alfred in the hospital, he's like, I thought I had sort of gotten past this, and he realizes like how absolutely terrified he is of going through that experience again. But yeah, and I had something else in my head that I wanted to segue into. I just don't remember what it was. It says somebody else say something. And
well, so you mentioned just kind of the trauma that Bruce lives with, and the way that that's reflected in the score, as AR alluded to. I do think the Kurt Cobain influences. I think Matt Reeves, who directed and wrote the film, has talked about listening to that song while he wrote the film, and that's why it made its way into the movie. And I feel like it is inherent because it helps show how Bruce lives with this every day. The trauma of losing his parents that made him Batman is inherent to his character, and we all know that. But it's usually cinematically expressed in a scene where he goes to visit his parents' grave in the rain, and he's like crying, and and then he goes and does what he needs to do. Here we kind of get to see how tortured he is every single day, and he is not truly living as Bruce Wayne. He is Batman, and Bruce Wayne is his mask. That is ultimately the case with most iterations of the character, but it's rarely so realized as to see how it's adversely affecting his life as Bruce Wayne. Because, for instance, again, in the Dark Knight trilogy or in the Tim Burton franchise, both of which I love, Bruce's kind of playboy image, it's there, but it's really kind of like it's portrayed as hollow. He knows he is playing a role when he's doing that. Here, Bruce has no interest in playing that role. There was an interesting little aside where, Alfred is trying to get him to go to talk to the accountants because Wayne Enterprises is in financial trouble, because Bruce is really not interested in his company. And he's like, I don't care about that. What I'm doing is my family's legacy. And I think that's an interesting place to start the character, because I do think as the series goes on, we may see Bruce as more of the public figure. There's the interesting little aside with Bella Real, the mayoral candidate, where she comes up to him at the mayor's funeral, and she's like, you really could be doing more for this city. Your parents have a history of charitable works, but as far as I can tell, you're not doing anything. And it's meant to be like ironic little line, because of course he is doing something, but is he doing everything that he could be doing? Clearly not. Bruce Wayne has ways of helping Gotham that are beyond Batman, and Batman does the things that Bruce Wayne can't, but he's not a full, he's not living his full life right now. And I think that part of that ending beat where he realizes that he needs to become more, he can't just be vengeance, that is like, that doesn't just mean Batman needs to become more than a symbol of terror, but a symbol of hope. I think it ultimately means that Bruce Wayne needs to step up to the plate too.
Yeah, I definitely saw that conversation, like the seeds being planted in that conversation that he had with her, and then with his resolve at the end of the movie. I think we're going to see more of, him fulfilling more of that traditional, Bruce Wayne persona in movies ahead. But it was great to see him starting from this place. And that's another thing that was interesting about this, is we got to see him at a stage of his for lack of a better term, career as Batman that we usually don't get to see. It wasn't like an all-out origin story, and it wasn't when he's like firmly established himself, you know, as the iconic Batman. This is when he's still in the process of sort of getting things going and ironing out that. Like, I love I kind of love the scene where he, you know, is escaping from the police station, and, you know, he's not this like contraption that just, you know, is like a blow up suit. And it's like he screws it up so badly. Like, it's like you're expecting like Batman to have like these wings that jut out and like he's gonna safely glide down. But no, it's just this big, you know, weird looking thing, and then he goes down, and then the parachute gets caught.
He looks more like a sugar glider than a bat.
Yeah, exactly. And then he just completely screws it up and tumbles and rolls on the street, and it's like, yeah, that looks like it hurt.
I also did want to mention about anger and depression. Anger is actually a symptom of depression. So especially in men, aggression and anger is often the way that they express their feelings. Society obviously tells men that that is the way to express their feelings, that there is no other way because of the patriarchy. Drink, everybody. Hey, I mentioned the patriarchy, but yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But I think that, and if you look at Selina Kyle too, while I'm talking about misogyny and the patriarchy, she's been, her father, right, and these criminals are kind of like representative of like the man, right? Like corporations, head of corporations keeping you down. And there, I think you can see this actually as kind of having a little bit of an anti-capitalist bent, which I like. And so I think there's a lot going on there with the gender dynamics of the way that Selina Kyle has been treated, the way that she's seen as this, like, you know, the way that they see all the club girls as being kind of there for some grabbing some ass, and, you know, that's it.
For decoration, you know? Yeah.
There was a great like similarity to, which I kind of love, the and, you know, the movie I'm referencing is not super great in the way it portrays everything in the movie, but one of the great things about Silence of the Lambs is the way that you feel all the men's, you know, eyes on the character. Why can't I remember?
Clarice Starling.
Clarice Starling. Yeah, like how do I not remember Clarice? But yeah, just, and I think that's part of what always for me made that the best of the Hannibal Lecter films was just the eeriness of the cinematography and the way that you feel like, you know, you're in her shoes and everybody's watching her, and so there was a lot of that in the club scene with the fact that, you know, Bruce is seen through her eyes, and she even has a moment where she's like, you know, it doesn't feel good, does it? And and then,
and there were parts, right, and returned gaze was also a thing, right? He says, look back again, and she's like, I don't want to, because when, as a woman, when you return a gaze, it can be read as an invitation.
You're
right?
opening a whole can of worms. So
exactly. If you're too nice, right? If you show too much interest is always the thing. So, and then like, but then if you're not nice, you're a bitch, right? So it's like this double standard. But I think Selina Kyle really, and her mother was this throwaway woman, right? So when we're talking about choices, like, she really didn't have any. And it's also showing the degradation of sex workers and escorts and, you know, people who legitimately are workers.
Yeah. I mean, it says that she kind of grew up in that club, which is like a horrible place for a child to grow up, but but she understands how that dynamic is played, because once she sits down with the DA, she flips it on a totally different personality on. She's like, oh, I like you too. You know, just like, it's completely different. And yes, she has an agenda. She's trying to get information that they're looking for, but that's how you have to be to survive in that environment, because these are these are powerful people. It's a very misogynistic environment. You know, like just say organized crime and mafia is not exactly known for equality to women. You know, so it's like you have to be accommodating and friendly to these type of people to survive in that type of environment. Because look at what happened to Annika. She knew too much. You know, she was just probably at the wrong place, wrong time, and listened to the wrong person talking. You know?
Yeah, and the other woman that Selina ends up talking to, she's like,
yeah,
I don't like this kind of
Do you
talk.
have a death wish?
Yeah. Like, so it just goes to show that the women that work there, their real personalities are behind a mask of this like frivolous good time, you know, everything's great, you know, make the men comfortable and keep them entertained, you know?
Yeah, and Bruce has like serious growing up to do over the course of this movie, because like the way that, you know, he just like is completely comfortable like putting her in that situation, and you know, and I like when she's just like nope and taking out.
She's had enough.
Right.
I mean, she's such an integral part of his growth. She's the Rose Tico of this film in a way, and I'll always defend Rose Tico with my life. So,
yeah. Hashtag we love Rose.
Yes, Rose Tico Defense Squad. But yeah, like she really, it's amazing that it's like that the way Selina grew up. She is cynical. Don't get me wrong. She does have her cynical side, and she does, to a certain degree, think maybe Bruce is wasting a bit of his time, or his efforts are wasted but what he goes on to do. But at the same time, she respects him for it. And, but she absolutely does have her compassionate, loving side, to the point, and which is amazing for how she grew up. She could be so much more hardened than she is, but she's obviously an animal lover. She has healthy relationships with, at least, I mean, we think it's healthy. She cares deeply about Annika and what happens to her, when she could easily have closed off that part of herself and not cared about anyone to avoid being hurt, you know? So she is quite amazing in that way, that she still has an open heart in some ways. And it's a pity it's kind of bittersweet the way they end, they leave it. It's kind of, I believe they have just put a pause on it, but that was the most romantic motorcycle ride I have ever seen on film. That was beautiful, the way he catches up to her, and they just have to ride for a distance together, and before finally coming to that T in the road, and then.
Which, by the way, and like I have to say, I talked about like the sort of propulsive nature of the main theme of the movie, but the love theme over the course, and by extension, Selina's own musical theme is just so beautiful and so lyrical. But then I love how you got that like over, you know, that ending motorcycle ride, and then it rises up and there's this really sharp crescendo as the scene cuts to black after like focusing on Bruce's face. The music is just like, this is like the kind of full-bodied, you know, orchestral score that just makes me so excited. And you know, and sorry everybody, this is like one of my few like anti-MCU things that I'll say.
You really controlled yourself this
I've controlled myself. Like Giacchino does a lot of MCU scores, but he has to kind of play within the guidelines of those films. So like the score is always a bit sort of restrained and it's doing its job, but they never really let the music have center stage. this was the Giacchino that I've loved since he worked on Lost. We talked about the chase scene with the Batmobile and, all that. The score and the sound effects in that whole sequence are in overdrive in the best possible way. And I actually had to turn down my my stereo system a bit because I was like, my neighbors are going to be like, what the hell is going on over there? But just so great. No, what I was going to mention before because I'll take the tiniest invitation to talk about the score, but what I was actually going to say beforehand was when you mentioned about like Selina and her cats. This movie has absolutely brilliant, like very small comedic moments that, like, it's such a dark and overwhelming story, but then you get little beats like, you got a lot of cats.
or
I have
or
a thing for stories.
I think my favorite is like, what, do you live in a cave or something?
Yeah.
And but then also thumb drive.
Oh my God.
and then Gordon's like, oh, this guy is hilarious.
A very special guest who's joined us.
Oh,
he was scratching on the door, and I said, okay, you can come in, but you're kind of late for the stream. So he's fashionably late.
Aww.
This is the real reason why I have to meet AR in person. It's really just Mushroom.
It's really to meet Mushroom, yeah.
Yeah.
He takes forever to warm up to men, John. I swear he like smells the testosterone or something. Like all the women I've brought over, he's warmed up to, but all of the men that he's met, he's just been like absolutely not.
Yes, but I was told the same thing about Zuko.
Oh, yeah.
And he came right up to me. So
That's
we'll see.
We will see.
No, and anyway, so I was going to use the joke that the funny line that Gordon has as a segue to we're at the 2-hour mark, but I do want to make sure we talk about Gordon, because I absolutely adore Jeffrey Wright. He's like, I think the first, probably not the first thing I saw him in, but the first thing that I really took notice was in Casino Royale.
Yeah.
When he played Felix Leiter, and instantly I was like, oh my God, I love this guy. because like he was poking fun at Bond throughout the movie, but there was this kinship between them that was great. And he's just like, there's been a lot of good actors to play Gordon, and I love Gary Oldman in the part, but this is like such great casting. I just love when they're conspiring to get him out of the police station, and he's like, that's why you punched me.
Yeah.
I love his line where he's like, no guns. He's like, yeah, that's your thing.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be coming in without a gun.
Yeah, no, they have such a great relationship in this movie, and Bruce is kind of maladjusted in a lot of his relationships throughout the film, but one of the things that humanizes him throughout the course of the movie is he and Gordon really do seem like they have a strong, like, brotherly, almost, understanding, because they are on the same page. It really does feel like them against the world at times. And we didn't see the genesis of their relationship in this particular iteration, but they trust one another. There's that moment at the top of the tower where, Batman's like, do you trust them? And Gordon's like, I only trust you. And, and you feel that, it's earned because you see them look out for one another. You see them work together. You see them, essentially pick up on each other's thoughts. We haven't really touched on the fact that, one of the selling points of this movie was as a detective story. Batman is the world's greatest detective, which we haven't really seen quite as much in some of the other cinematic adaptations, just because it's hard to do. It's hard to do that on screen. But Trish has mentioned Seven several times. Part of the reason that movie works so incredibly well is the camaraderie between Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman's detective characters, and Bruce and Gordon fulfill that role in this movie. where they are, they are the veteran and the rookie in a certain way, but they're also on each other's level, and they complement each other in the best ways. And I really feel like Gordon is steadfast throughout the movie, but he also kind of undergoes that process of learning what he can be to help Gotham, as kind of, if Batman is the Dark Knight, Gordon is kind of the bastion of law and order, who, we see the corruption in the police department with Savage, and then we see the cops who are just like not great people overall. But Gordon is the one you look to that says, like, this is what Gotham can be. And you really need that steadfast character, because everyone else is going through such a tortured emotional journey. Gordon is not. Gordon knows what he needs to do, and I think his perspective in that movie is so valuable. And I thought that Jeffrey Wright is was such
little bit different.
Yeah, Barbosa he is not. But Jeffrey Wright is such an incredible actor, and I do think that his role as Felix Leiter in the James Bond films may have helped influence his casting in this movie, because he plays that role here, and he plays it brilliantly.
Yeah, no, yeah, this is so good. And you mentioned the moments where he says, "I only trust you," and then there's another moment also when, he's like, "Man, I was on that case or whatever," and Batman says, "Yeah, but the Riddler's not interested in you. Why? Because you're not dirty." He doesn't even it's not even a consideration.
Yeah, he doesn't doubt him. At all.
Yeah, and maybe it should be, because you should suspect everybody, but their trust is so ironclad by that point that he knows that Gordon's not caught up in any of it. So yeah, I remember. I'll just say, I remember the minute his casting was announced, I was like, because I was pretty, I already said, I was skeptical about a number of things when this movie was announced, because it kind of felt like retreading ground that had already been covered with a dark and gritty, realistic Batman. And then I wasn't sure about Robert Pattinson's new casting, which I was wrong. I'll go ahead and say that. But when I heard that Jeffrey Wright had been cast as Gordon, I was like, oh, that's good. I will see this, if for no other reason. So yeah. Something else I wanted to mention, this is kind of out in left field, but we were talking about the influences of this earlier, and how not only film influences, but also it takes things from Batman the Animated Series, which one of those things being the detective angle, because since that was a series, you really got to take the time to watch Batman doing his detective thing, and he does that in this as well, which I love, just because it's part of his character that we don't normally get to see in the movies, because usually the movies are so consumed with, let's get this action scene in there, and have him flying off of rooftops in this scene. But that is definitely a big part of who he is. But on influences that I would not have guessed, and I think that this was Matt Reeves' introduction to the character of Batman. I could be wrong, but there are even some sly 60s Batman references in this, which are great. I think the costume, the cowl or whatever, it's very much just with the way it's very sort of circular on top in a way that kind of reminds me a bit of not too much, but there's a little touch of Adam West Batman there. And then also there's another moment where he's going off of a building, and he walks down it with a line, so it's like the inverse of when they're when him and Robin are climbing up the buildings in the TV show. So like, you know, they didn't go too far with it, like, you know, like Batman Forever did with, you know, like the, you know, holy whatever Batman, you know, but I like that there were some, you know, some sly stuff in there that if you were paying attention, it was there, because, you know, you can debate whether it was for better or for worse, but it's like that show was part of the fabric of Batman, and so I like that there's still little ways that they that certain filmmakers will incorporate that in there. Yeah. So anything else you guys want to bring up that we haven't addressed? I mean, it's a big movie, so there's stuff I know we haven't covered, but since we are a bit past that 2-hour mark, just so I can maybe avoid turning this into a 3-hour stream.
I'm good, actually.
I think
yeah.
There's probably more to say, but I think we covered a lot of ground. Like,
yeah,
I will say that Zoe's nails were fantastic. I dig the claws.
Like, dig the nails.
I don't think I fully noticed until there's a scene, you know,
towards
the end where
she's got those like full stiletto acrylics on for.
I'm like, oh wow, yeah, Kitty's got claws.
Yeah.
Really trying to communicate like how, like, being professional here, like her performance was just stellar and outstanding, and you know, I love like the, you know, the design of, you know, what they did with the costume and just everything, but also Zoe Kravitz,
very striking.
Yes,
very stunning.
Yeah, she I mean, Zoe Kravitz is a beautiful woman, obviously, but one of the things that I just really felt made her so powerful was, like, I mean, she's an incredibly attractive character, but I was attracted to the character of Catwoman in this movie, not just, oh, Zoe Kravitz is pretty. It's because she made her feel like truly Selina Kyle had, like, come to life. And I thought she just did a phenomenal job. Everyone did.
Yeah, and I do want to say, like, more seriously, it's been really interesting watching her career evolution. I think I first saw her in X-Men First Class, where she had a smaller role in that, where she didn't get to do that much, but then I remember she was in Mad Max Fury Road. And I thought she got some great material in that, and she's been in other stuff, and now to see her with this role, I actually really hope that she comes back sooner rather than later in the follow-ups, you know, to this film, because just what she brought to the film, just in the you know, and I don't mean just, you know, chemistry in that way, but also the acting chemistry between her and Robert Pattinson was just so part of what made this movie like work so well. And so, like, if they go with the angle of having like her sit out number 2 and come back number 3, like, that'll still work for me, but I kind of wanted to just have her back for for each of the movies. So, yeah, no, just one of my absolute favorite movies of last year. If it wasn't for The Northman, it would probably be my number 1. And Blue, we'll talk about The Northman, you know, at some point coming up.
Oh my God!
And that'll be another one of our, you know, fever dream
off the rails,
going down the rabbit hole streams, because but yeah, we'll get there. And so I just absolutely love this. It's the kind of movie that just thrills me, because it's, you know, it's based off of source material that I love, and it also is the kind of cinema that I just really vibe with at this point, in my life. And yeah, I couldn't have asked for anything better. It's probably among like my top 3 live action Batman films. I think for me, like Batman Returns and The Dark Knight are, remain on pretty firm footing. But this was just incredible. And it had like the epic scale, and like, it was a crime drama, and it was also, mystery and film noir. And it is just so much stuff that I don't think we've gotten to see in Batman in live action, at least before. And yeah, so utterly fantastic. Yeah, I guess that's about all I have to say. If you guys have any final thoughts, or should we start wrapping this up?
Yeah, I'll just say that, I, as someone who loves Batman dearly, all the movies, the entire mythos of the character, like, I was just so impressed with this movie, because when I, went from the first time I saw the trailer all the way back in 2020, I just thought it looked amazing. And then movies don't always live up to their trailer. But, this one, at, from minute 1 of its 3-hour runtime all the way through to the end, I was never bored. I was never distracted. I was completely engrossed. As I mentioned earlier, the movie just flew by. And when I walked out of it at the end of the screening, I had that feeling that you only get rarely when you walk out of a movie, which was like, I think that's going to be one of my favorite movies of all time. And sometimes when when people think about their favorite movies of all time, sometimes it doesn't grow on you right away. Like, sometimes, you see a movie, like, I don't know how I feel about that. And then as you watch it again and again and again, that love builds. Other times you walk out and you're like, that was the greatest thing ever. And then as you watch it again and again, it doesn't hold up for you as well. With this one, I walked out of it just feeling like, I think that's going to stand the test of time for me. And I'm very happy to say that on rewatches, it not only has, I think my love for it has grown. And so, yes, I think it is probably one of my favorite movies of all time, maybe top 25 in that area. Is it my favorite Batman movie? It's hard to go against The Dark Knight. That was just such a defining film for me at that point in my life. But in terms of like Batman as a character, this might actually be it. And I can't say enough good things about it. Just an amazing achievement all around. I'm so happy that Matt Reeves is going to continue this universe with everything that's going on with DC, with the soft reboot and all that. I'm just glad to hear that this particular corner is going to be left untouched. I'm down for whatever he wants to do next, whether that's the Penguin series, whatever he wants to do in the sequel. If he wants to bring in Mr. Freeze, go for it. I'd love to see what Poison Ivy looks like in this universe. I'd love to see what Clayface looks like in this universe. I mean, however fantastical and weird he wants to get, or however dark and gritty and grounded, if bring in Hush, whatever, I am here for it, because he just earned my trust so completely with this. And
now I'm desperate to see Clayface in these movies, because like that's a character that I've never seen like outside of the animated series, and I love him so much. I just want to interject and say, like, I missed out on the opportunity to actually see this in theaters. I ended up having to watch it on HBO Max, just because I think about the time it came out was when my life was kind of falling apart. So I ended up watching it like a month or two later at home, but it was no less impressive, for having to do that. But I'm going to fix that with the sequel whenever it comes out. I'm going to see it on as big a screen as possible. Okay, Blue?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, it just, I just love the artful weaving together of all these influences into a comic book movie. That is incredible to me. I love that detective noir type style of thriller. It delivered on all the fronts. So I was so impressed with that, of what God, I hate to say that because it sounds like I'm downing comic book movies, and I'm really not. It's just like it just seems like it just kind of like upped the level of what we could do with a comic book movie and blend genres together. And it was very thoughtful. It kind of like reminded me of the way Rian Johnson as a director has his vision and you know has his influences and message that he wants to you know uh, come through in his movies. And I feel like that this was a kind of movie that had a very clear vision. So yeah, I don't know. It just, I'm not, I kind of like, I do get Marvel fatigue at times. So, and not that I don't like a lot of Marvel movies, I do. I don't know. It just like hit all the, all the good points for me.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, which is that it's a movie with a clear vision, which you don't always get with comic book films. It's that same reason why a movie that was a potential for next week, but we're gonna have to hold off for another time, which was Logan, is another example of a film with a clear vision. And that's that's in the Marvel realm, probably my favorite Marvel movie. I hope we get to see more of that, and that with the whole DC Elseworlds bracket of movies, I hope that that's not just for projects that were already in development when DC decided to do their soft reboot. I actually hope that we'll get to continue to see individual artistic expressions of Marvel characters and storylines and things of that nature. Because I'm inclined to be cynical about that, but at least for now, like this particular film and its sequels is safe. And we're also getting like another Joker film, which I'm happy about. So hopefully, I would love for Marvel to do something similar, where I don't know what the equivalent would be called, but like a Marvel Elseworlds kind of thing where we get that. So yeah, and finally we come to AR. What just final thoughts overall?
Yeah, I think that this movie has kind of a soul to it, like a heart to it, and I think that's what really draws me to it, is that it has a lot to say about the human condition and humanity and what a society is and how a society functions. And it also kind of, I think, presents a lot of questions, of like, why Bruce Wayne? Why does he have this privilege to be able to be this vigilante, but other people are doing it, can't quite do it like he can. He is the Batman, right? And some of it's money for him to be able to do it. But I think a lot of it is his need for revenge that drives him, his need to stomp down on the criminal element, to do something that every time he's fighting, someone, I think he imagines when he was a little kid and if he could have saved his parents, so with every punch, it's like he's punching the person that shot his father.
Oh yeah, and you totally get that, just especially in the beginning when he's just laying into,
kind of overkill in a way, but it's not killing. But it's
well, and then yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
But then, like you said, but then growing to find a place that justice has to be bigger than my personal pain. It has to be, and justice it can't be just, obviously, but it can't be just vengeance. Justice has to also make room for mercy and compassion, and and discernment of between, say, someone like Falcone and someone who is ill, like the Riddler. So yeah.
And I will say again, like, just then to go to like the end of the movie where he has to inject himself with whatever that stuff is, and then he like goes into like rage mode.
Yeah, they never really explained that, did they? Or never really.
It's some kind of stimulant, but
yeah. I look at that and I'm like, how is that different from the drop heads? I'm sorry. I just feel like they could have done
that. Was a little weird
thing. Yeah.
And I just reminded myself of I'm thinking thinking of the Legend of Vox Machina, and I'm thinking, I want to rage. Sorry. But yeah, no, and actually I actually kind of have hope for them. Like, it'd be nice to think that maybe that's set up for some stuff that maybe they'll dive deeper into in the next film, or even possibly in the Penguin series. Because like what Jared touched on with, it's not just Batman that needs to step up, it's Bruce Wayne too. And there are things that Bruce can do better than Batman for helping with the ills of society and reaching out to those people who are on the streets, who have no choice, and in being caught up in whether it's drugs or any other thing. And so I hope to see some of that, because historically that's a big part of what Bruce is involved in with, like, we saw some of that in like the Dark Knight Rises, where he needs to like reach out to like the orphan kids and and those who can't, who don't have the ability to help themselves. And so yeah, I kind of hope that we get to dive into some of that stuff and maybe pay off some of the stuff that's a bit more subtle in this film. And yeah, so we'll see. Fingers crossed for that. And I do think the fact that we're getting a TV show set in this world means that we're going to get to dive more into things of that nature, that you can't cover in even a 3-hour movie. So yeah, so we'll see how that pans out. Either way, I'm looking forward to to all the stuff we're going to get to see in this world. And like the thing that I just can't wait for the Penguin series is more Colin Farrell as the Penguin, because oh my god, it's going to be great. So yeah, so it's wrapping up. I'll just talk again about things that are coming up next week. Going to be talking Kill Bill Volume 1 with AK and AR. I always point the wrong way. Yeah, I wasn't sure at first whether we were going to cover the whole of Kill Bill or split it up, because Volume 2 might have to wait a couple weeks. But I thought, no, we already did the compression thing with our Tarantino stream. I really want to be able to dive into these movies because they're so good. So yeah, next week will be Kill Bill Volume 1. And the week after that, Aaron will be on for The Mask of Zorro. And then the week after that, on what is that, the 27th, we will be having AR's birthday stream talking about Mulan, which I'm really excited, because the last time I watched that movie, I think it was for the watch party that we had. I was just, and this is me getting nerdy about my like home video technology, but like I think I watched it in plain old HD, and now it's on Disney Plus in 4K, ultra high def, so it's gonna look gorgeous. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. It's great to be back, and guys, this was such a fantastic discussion about this film that I feel like it went all over the place. We got to talk about a lot of fascinating things, so thank you very much. And yeah, I'll see you guys next Saturday. Have a great night. Bye. Oh, subscribe to the channel. I never say that. Subscribe. Oh, and you know what? False alarm. We're not leaving yet. AR, go ahead and plug your stuff again real quick.
Yes, you can find me on YouTube for Amy Blackfire, AEMY, Blackfire with a Y. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm very active.
And Blue, your podcast.
Oh yes,
Get to work.
Again. Silent Sisters podcast. We're Sister Silent on Twitter. We're coming out on a new episode soon. I just had to get some real life stuff done. Like,
no, it was the funniest thing. I'll just full disclosure. Little Wolf Bird. Like, I was having a discussion with her at Ice and Fire Con where I was like, "Oh, it's so great! I'm
so glad you got to talk to her."
I'm like, I'm having Blue come on for a bunch of my streams. She's really gonna know about some stuff. And then, as an aside, she was just like, "Yeah, tell her it'd be nice for her to work on some stuff for our channel."
You know what? I don't blame her. Great. I don't blame her. I would have been that. I would have thrown the shade too. So like, I don't blame her.
Oh God. But I'm gonna be greedy. I'm glad you're here.
Okay. I have to mix it up. It can't be just all a Song of Ice and Fire. So like,
exactly. And yeah, we are going to talk soon about planning out when you're available, because we've got those those classics that we want to talk about.
Yes. Cinema.
Yeah. And also, and you listed a bunch of other stuff that you're interested in too. I'm not going to be shy about drafting you for all of them. So. All right. Okay. Now we've gone 2 minutes over when I said we were leaving. Goodbye. Goodbye for real this night. Have a great night, guys. Bye.